Good morning, everybody. Dr. McDonald, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, GPE staff. Thank you so much. I know we moved over from our normal Google Meet to our Zoom, so thank you for working with those tech needs. Good morning, rest of Central Office, and good morning, Kirkpatrick. We're happy to have you, team. There's a number of different individuals, so thanks for your flexibility this morning as we worked around the tech and Constitution Day. I'd like to introduce those of you. I know sometimes it's always on Zoom, but I'm glad that we have the technology to support events like this. And so I'd like to introduce our superintendent, Dr. McDonald, who will frame this morning for us.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you via Zoom. That's one of the positives with all this COVID stuff is everyone learned a little bit more about technology, and so this is great. And Judge Kirkpatrick is actually in Oklahoma. That's where she grew up and lives, and where she spends all of her time. But we're super excited. Of course, tomorrow is actually Constitution Day, and so we're celebrating Constitution Day today. And I definitely want to let you know that Judge Kirkpatrick, Nikki Kirkpatrick, is actually my cousin. And I know that in some cultures, cousin is used a lot, but she really is my true first cousin. She looks and feels more like my niece because we're quite a few years apart, but we're super proud of her. She has an amazing story from her beginning to where she is now. And she is just such a positive role model. And I know, like, when you think about Constitution Day, it's about the people. This is not about government. The Constitution is about the people. And she is all about the people. I know that's what motivates her, is making changes for the people that she represents. So I would like to introduce her, and Judge Kirkpatrick, we can go as long as you would like, 15 minutes or whatever. And then if you'd like to spend some, 5 minutes with answering some questions, I don't know if Mr. Williams, if you already mentioned to the teachers that if there's a question that the teacher feels is a good question for her, then you can type it in, and then whatever time you have, you can answer a few questions. So welcome, Judge Kirkpatrick.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Yes, I'm good deal. All right. Well, I'm so glad to be here and to be able to just speak with all of you. I feel like education in my world changes everything. Education is critical to no matter where you come from. It's the great equalizer. So I'm so happy to be able to speak with all the students here today. And I know that you all have quite a tremendous school. So I'll get started because I've been told that I can be long-winded. So I'll try not to do that, and I won't be boring this morning. I am Judge Nikki Kirkpatrick. I started out going to law school. I didn't anticipate going to law school. I originally wanted to be a veterinarian. I love animals, and then I wanted to go into business because I'm okay with numbers and all that. But something about law just drew me, and I think it was because of my background. I was raised in a household where there was a lot of substance abuse. My father struggled with crack addiction and alcohol addiction all his life. Literally, my mom and dad met when they were 17, 18 years old, and he was an alcoholic already by the time he was 17 years old. So had quite the history. When I was young, we see a lot of interracial couples now, but when I was a kid, that was extremely rare. So rare that many people told my parents they thought that I would be born with Down syndrome or some type of developmental disability, that I would not be able to function properly. So I think my goal as a young child was just to prove them wrong and to do well in school. And school was my outlet because home was wild. I spent a lot of time at crack houses when I was a kid, spent a lot of time sleeping on the floor, sleeping in cars, things like that. So my mother was extremely hardworking, but she could not outpace my father's addiction. So we spent a lot of time just in survival. There was domestic abuse in my household. There was times I observed My father abused my mother, and a lot of people think that domestic abuse victims are that they are weak and snivelly and all that stuff. That wasn't the case at all. My mother was strong. She was a fighter. It was just a bad relationship, bad situation. She got with him when she was 18 years old, and it was not a healthy environment. My mom said she always thought that as soon as a child came into the situation, things would change. He would quit the partying life, quit all that, and do better. But he didn't. And so we lived a very tumultuous background, and there was a lot of chaos, poverty, drugs, abuse, all of the things. So I hopped from school to school. But school was my only outlet. It was the only thing that I think I had control of. So I threw myself into school because I knew that I didn't want to continue that lifestyle that I was born in. And so I was like, okay, education is my way out. I'm gonna get a good job. I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna be from my two parents, neither one of them ever went to college. So I was like, I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna get an education. I'm gonna get out of this life. And so I mean, at the age of like 8 or 9 in third grade, I had like savings jars to save money because I was going to get a car, and I was going to run away at 16. I was going to get out of the situation. Thankfully, we didn't have to do that. My mother and I were able to escape when I was about 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old, and just hid out. Had to go through the court system. My dad was constantly in and out of jail. And so we got to start a new life. And, my mother worked very, very hard. She was a waitress for about 20 years, was able to get an office job and work her way up. She has a high school diploma, and she's now an accounting manager at a multi-million-dollar construction company. And that turned our whole life around, just hard work, never giving up. So went through school, did well in college. Law school kind of knocked me on my tail a little bit. Law school's a little harder. And so I was able to do that. And I married my high school sweetheart. He and I have been together since I was 17. And so we got married right after undergrad and before law school. And then we had our first child, my second year at law school. So that was a fun thing to do. But we went from there and just worked hard. I started at the district attorney's office after law school. And my passion soon came for domestic violence victims. And so I worked tirelessly for domestic violence victims, because in my mind, even though those are some of the most complex and difficult cases, if I could help just one person, then that changes their whole lineage. And that's kind of the way I looked at like what happened for me, and like my whole line changed because the path that we were going down was obviously not a very productive one. And so my perspective was I could be that change for each individual. So although I may have 200, 300 cases at any given time, what could I do for this person before me today? And so I did that. I prosecuted a lot of domestic violence, homicide, things like that, and became the chief special prosecutor there, and trained up younger lawyers on how to help victims, and not just help victims, but help defendants as well. So many times these individuals who get charged with crimes, it's because they've never seen anything better modeled for them. It's what they were raised in, it's what they experienced as children. And so giving everybody, I'm like, okay, well, we can't lock them all up. So what's the goal here? The goal is to hopefully interject into that situation, and hopefully they can see that they don't have to live this way. And so that was both for the victims and for the defendants, those charged with crimes. It was, I wanted to give them both a perspective of life can be different, because that's what I had the benefit of. And so I prosecuted those cases. I did that for about 8 years. And then I went to the Attorney General's office, and I was able to help victims of consumer fraud, mostly elderly people taken advantage of, people who get their livelihoods wiped out by people who want to steal from them, and how that's important, because that's how they, if they get their car stolen, they can't get to work. If they, get their bank account wiped out, how they feed their kids. So it was really important to me to be able to do that. And then from there, I got appointed to the bench. And so I've been on the bench about a year and a half now, and it is absolutely a dream come true. It's one of those situations, coming from where I come from. I was like, is this possible for someone like me to become a judge? But obviously God thought so. So I became a judge about a year and a half ago, and I've been able to preside over probate and guardianship cases where their loved one has died, and trying to settle those estates. The guardianship cases were near and dear to my heart, because that's where children were in a situation where neither one of their parents could properly take care of them. Whether it be due to domestic violence, whether it be because of mental illness, substance abuse, all of those things. Those were the people that came before me, and so figuring out a safe place for those children to be, and then also got to preside over some adoptions where they, weren't able to go back to their parents, but they had loving people willing to take these children and help them out. So it was absolutely a tremendous experience. I popped over to civil for a minute. Now I'm on the criminal docket, which of course is my passion. That's what I've done the most in, and I've been on criminal now almost a year. And so in that, I get to see people at all stages. I get to see people who've, young people who've made mistakes, and they need an opportunity to start again. And that's what we try to facilitate. We try to give them the opportunity to see where their thinking went wrong, where their environment may have led them to think that they could only live. We have a huge gang problem in Oklahoma. And so, where they thought, well, gangs is the only way to be safe, and to help foster people moving out of that life and realize, like, you can live outside of these bad situations. And then obviously we have our people who've been offenders for a really long time, trying to get them into substance abuse treatment. We have a really good program here in Oklahoma where we can get people in treatment for mental health and substance abuse. And then, of course, our violent offenders. And those are the ones where, if it's not a one-time thing, but this is a repeat offender, then those are the people that we want to keep off the streets. And so, we have a big scale of what we do, but I'm proud to do it. So I'd love to, like I said, I hope not to be long-winded. So I love any questions or any thoughts of what you guys want to discuss.
Can you speak a little bit about your how your job really is impacted by the Constitution, or how that guides you, whether it's
Absolutely.
U.S. Constitution or Oklahoma Constitution?
Yeah, no, the Constitution, particularly in criminal law, is extremely important. We never want to take away someone's liberty. That's literally what our forefathers fought for, was liberty, freedom, not being able to, many of these communist countries, many of these countries that don't have democracy, if the government doesn't like what you're saying or doing, they can just pluck you up and throw you in jail. They can just put you in prison for whatever slight offense with no due process. The Constitution literally guides everything we do. I'm very passionate about the Constitution, because I feel like it is the foundation of everything. And in fact, I did not really fully understand it and what all it meant and how valuable it was until I went to law school. And I'm like, this needs to be in every American high school. And I know Advantage does a lot to make sure that people know how important the Constitution is, because those are your rights. Those are literally everything. And if you don't know what your rights are, it's really easy to lose them. It's really easy to lose those safeguards, because our forefathers knew, like, the tyranny of government is important. It is a really serious threat that we all face every day. And so in the courtroom, the Constitution set up our system with the executive branch, meaning, whether it's on the federal level, your president, or on the state level, your governor. And then you've got your legislature, which, is your Senate and your House in both the Fed and the state level, and then your judiciary. And it's really important that the judiciary is independent. because the judiciary is what is interpreting those laws, making sure that those who are passing the laws are passing laws that fit with the Constitution, and make sure that we are protecting the rights of all people, no matter race, no matter background, no matter poverty, no matter wherever you are, everybody gets treated the same. And so the Constitution is extremely directive for me as I do my work every day. I keep it in mind of what is the due process. We can't just take away someone's rights without giving them a chance to be heard, without giving them a chance to have representation, without making sure that we on the bench are protecting the rights of people and making sure that everybody, the prosecution, the defense, everybody is following the law. And so the Constitution is one of those things that I look to almost every day, because I need to make sure that the rights of all parties are being protected and that everybody has a voice. That's my biggest thing in my courtroom, and the way courtrooms should be is that everybody has a voice. Everybody has an opportunity to settle their disputes, and to know that somebody is going to call the fouls and the balls and the strikes in a fair way, not with any kind of favoritism. And so that's why it's really important for election. I just went through a campaign process here recently, and it's hard because the judiciary needing to be independent, we don't necessarily represent anyone's particular interests. We hold to the law, and the law has to hold to the Constitution. And so, so many people on the campaign trail, they want their judges to say that they're for this or against that or whatever. But it's really important that we're not, that we truly stay neutral. And that as long as the law is in line with what the Constitution says, which is freedom and liberty for all people, then that way, and limited government, then that way I know that I'm doing my job.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? I've got a couple, but I would rather them come from the classrooms if you have any. Any teachers, any questions? Well, I would like, Nikki, you mentioned the fact that you are multiracial. How did that impact you as far as getting into the position that was it a positive, was it a negative, or what did it even matter? From your perspective?
From my perspective, I think both being biracial and being a young female, I think sometimes that hinders, particularly in law. Sometimes we have a system that favors, generally speaking, systems favor what's always been done. They favor the status quo. And so anytime you have new perspectives, new experiences, generally speaking, the system will resist. The system of whatever is there will resist it, because they don't understand it. They don't fully get it. And so someone not just being biracial, but also coming from a background that there was no silver spoon here. So, coming from a background that was not particularly from a higher socioeconomic position, being a younger female, that those challenge the status quo. And so, one thing is I applied before I became a district judge, which is I'm over the whole county. I had applied for a special judge position several times. And a special judge is like a magistrate or a justice of the peace type of position. And I applied for that position over and over and over again, because honestly, coming from where I come from, I just could not fathom me being in a district judge position. I knew that's where I wanted to be, but I didn't know how much resistance I would face. And so I applied for special judge several times and could not get through. But I just felt a calling to just keep trying. And then finally I quit trying for special judge, and I went for the district judge position, which is over it. And that door opened for me. And I was surprised by how many people were ready to see change on the bench. We had most of our bench was the same race, the same gender. I mean, there was very little diversity on it. And so when I started going for this position, I was surprised by how many people were really encouraging that, because they're like, we need diversity. We need a different perspective. We need a different background than what's on there, because everybody has the same background. People can't understand. A judge who has someone before them, they can't understand that somebody who's always been in a poor neighborhood, always been subject to gangs, may not have known there was an option. And so they're going to judge that case very differently than someone who's been there and says, you know what, I know you may not have had other options, but now we're going to give you an opportunity to see what those other options are. And then it'll be up to you whether you take advantage of those opportunities or not. And so I was surprised how homogenous the bench was, and how primed and ready people were to see it different, to see it diversified. And so now in Oklahoma County, which is the county seat, it's the seat of the whole state. Our capital's here, everything is here in Oklahoma County. I was really surprised to see how much shift we've seen in the last 5 years. We now have more women on the bench than men for the first time in history, which is, it was quite the surprising thing. We now have Hispanics on the bench, we have Asians on the bench, we have African Americans on the bench. And so we have really seen in the last 5 years a lot of diversity come through. And I think it's been good. It gives a more balanced perspective. And that's the whole, speaking of the Constitution, what's so great about it is we kind of have this dual party or multi-party system. And what it's supposed to do, sometimes recent politics doesn't allow it to do that, but what it's supposed to do is allow everybody to kind of come to the middle and say, okay, I want this, let's find that middle ground and balance those perspectives. And so by diversifying that bench, I think we're able to do that more.
That's great. We do have time for one last question that was typed in from Mr. Caswell. This is a government class. Do you find it difficult to stay neutral in your job and decisions you make with cases?
I think there's certain personalities that fit better in things. I'm one of those people that I really can remove emotions from my decision making. I can put my emotions over here and just look at facts. And so I don't find it very difficult to stay neutral. I know there are judges and there are other people who do. But it's something, it's almost like a muscle. You really do have to work at it. And I think I've had a lot of practice. My background was, I went to undergrad for political science and things like that, and really got to study both sides of a lot of arguments, both sides of a lot of perspectives. And so I think it's a muscle. I think it's something we need to practice. And I think it even helps if we practice that in our civics and then how we interact with our world. When I read a newspaper, I don't just read one story on a particular issue. I'll go and see if there's other stories about that same issue. And it gives me a more well-rounded perspective. And so I practice this in my everyday life, because I don't want to know what one person thinks or what one very slanted opinion is. I want to see the whole picture and make my own mind up, my own decision about that. So for me, I practice it like a muscle. And so when I get to the bench, it's very easy for me to kind of step back and see the whole picture and go, okay, there's that perspective. There's also this perspective. And where can we find that middle ground?
That's great. I love that, practicing it, that muscle of your brain.
Yes, and it is a muscle. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing, and this is just kind of jump-starting our year. And I've been wanting to do more of these kind of things. So I'm just grateful that you're taking your time to do this. So thank you so much. And I didn't mention, you may not have put two and two together, but our founder, Dr. Beck, is Judge Kirkpatrick's uncle. So,
yes.
So she has heard so much about Evangel Academy over the years, and so glad that she's able to be a part. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Williams.
Well, thank you all so much. You guys have a great one.
Thank you, Judge Kirkpatrick. Class teachers, thank you so much for your attentiveness and your ability to really be engaged here. I know I've learned a lot from Judge Kirkpatrick just around a new perspective or an additional perspective on the judicial system. And so I'm excited to see the conversations that this can stem during our social studies, government, and other classes throughout the course of the day, as well as throughout the course of this year, and the impact that this conversation has had upon you and what you will choose to do with it. So Dr. McDonald, thank you for your leadership and the ability to set this up and this experience for our students.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Judge, and thank you, everyone. Y'all have a great day.
Same. Bye-bye, all.